Baba, medical social worker, practicing with the Federal Medical Center, Makodi, Benue State, Nigeria. All right. I'll be talking on stigma and mental illness, understanding, addressing, and overcoming the social barriers. So what is mental illness? We can just say it's layman, as in for us to understand that it is a condition that causes diverse complications or diverse disturbances. And these disturbances could be psychological, social, medical, or biological, as the case may be. And it does not have respect for age, gender, or our socioeconomic background or status. Are there common symptoms that we need to watch out? Maybe when we see these symptoms, we know that, okay, this person is probably having a mental illness. Symptoms like irritability, changes in appetite, or sleep patterns. We have decreased energy. This person may be, somebody that is very active and agile, and then all of a sudden just withdraws to him or herself. Those are probably symptoms that when we see in us or others around us, we need to watch it. We also have withdrawal from social activities, difficulty in concentrating either at school or the workplace. Or you just sit and then the person is smiling to his or herself or talking. Now, this thing happens to us sometimes. Maybe you could just be sitting and then you remember something, an event that happened to you, you just sit and smile. That does not mean you have mental illness. It only becomes a disorder when it starts affecting your social interactions with people. That is when you now need interventions. Then what is stigma? The stigma briefly can be said to be a gap between the virtual social identity and the actual social identity. Now, when we say virtual, that is the way people see it. But the real thing is different. That is stigma. You can say this is black. Another person may see it to be what? White. It depends on the eye with which somebody views it. That is stigma. It's just that gap between the ideal, between what is real and what is seen to be real or said to be real. So understanding the complex dynamics of stigma and mental illness is crucial for developing effective strategies to addressing and overcoming these barriers. And as social workers, we know that the sole aim of our profession is the well-being of individuals. So if we understand that stigma has impact on not just the person alone, but the family and society, if we have this understanding, it will help us fight stigma in mental health so that individuals can come out better people in the society. What's our objective? We want to understand stigma and mental illness, explore these effects that it has, just like I said, on the individual, the family, and the society. Then we'll look at the social barriers to stigma, and then what are the strategies we need to put in place to overcome these barriers? And then are there actually benefits when we address this stigma? Historical overview. I don't think my time will permit me, but let me just go ahead and say some few things. In ancient civilization, because mental illness was associated with being possessed, they saw it to be like, okay, a demon possessed this person. So if you are down with mental illness, nobody wants to be associated with you because they don't want to be punished by the gods. They don't want demons to start opposing them. So they are stigmatized, they are kept aloof, in ancient civilization. Then we now moved to the 18th and 19th century. That was the emergence of psychiatric institutions. Because of the increased nature in mental illness, people now started to get institutions where they can keep these people away from the society. They now developed psychiatric asylums or shelters for these people. Then as time went on, the 20th century, we now started having researches being carried out. So there are now developments that mental illness is actually a medical condition and it's not a demonic possession or spiritual as, being said. Stigma and mental illness, what is the relationship? Do we actually have relationship with them, between them? Yes, they do. They share a bi-directional relationship because stigma influences the experiences and outcomes of individuals that have these mental health conditions. And then the presence of mental illness itself becomes a source of stigma. Because if you don't have the mental illness, the stigma will not be there. And then the stigma is there because of the social, of the mental illness. So it's just like two sides of a coin. Two sides of a coin. There's no stigma without the mental illness, and the mental illness, so they work hand in hand. So that is the relationship between them. And types of stigma. We have the public, we have the self, we have the structural, and then we have professional stigma. This public stigma here refers to the bias that people, public individuals in the public, now the family of those persons that have a mental illness, have towards the person that has this mental illness. The eye at which they look at this person that has this mental illness is what referred to as well, the public stigma. How do they view these people? That's the public stigma. Then the self-stigma now. Every day, this person is hearing, you are crazy, you are mad, look at this and that. Then the person sees himself as like, I don't have worth anymore. Then all these things now gets into the person. Then he begins to internalize these things and say, oh, well, after all, they say I'm worthless, I'm hopeless, and all of that. So that is self-stigma until the person now comes in terms with that thing that the outside world is seeing him. Self-stigma is not attained. But when he now accepts those things, that is when we say, okay, this person has self-stigma. Then we also have structural stigma. This structural stigma comes in shared responsibilities, the place of work. Because this person has a history of a mental condition. You know that this person can do this job. But because he or she has a history, you now say, no, instead of giving this person this responsibility or giving this person these resources or something or money, you prefer to give another person. That is stigma. You're stigmatizing that person structurally because you feel that that person is incapable of handling that position or responsibility, whereas the person can do it, irrespective of the fact that the person had a mental condition. That the professional ones, the professional stigma, these are people that the stigma comes from those handling their cases in the healthcare facilities. Even if you visit the hospitals, they don't put their units together with the other medical ailments. They are always secluded. And often, their own place is even with, just look at their buildings. Maybe towards almost the last plot of the hospital, that's where they keep them. And they are always fenced. That is what professional stigma. These people come to you for help, for assistance. And then instead of you, taking care of them, you're also putting them like aloof. That is the professional stigma we're talking about. And they don't give them the optimum care. They don't give them that optimum care. The care they give them is inadequate most of the times. So what are the impacts now on the person? The impact of this stigma on a person that has mental illness. We have the emotional impact, the psychological impact, and then the social impact. What is this emotional impact all about? Here we talk about instability in relationships. Like in couples now that have this mental illness, there's what we call delusion of love. The person is hallucinating. Like, okay, I'm married to the person. If I come here now and say I am the president's wife, you just imagine what is the relationship. So sometimes these people that have mental illness, emotionally, their couples suffer, their partners suffer, because when that delusion of love comes, they can just look at you and say, you're not my husband today. You're not my husband. You're not my wife. And then they are loving someone else. So that emotional instability, it causes a lot, and we really need to understand that. Or parents, even to children, it also affects. Then there's domestic violence. You have abuse. We have depression. All of these are the emotional impacts that this stigma has on mental illness. Because I said they are by relationship, they are by, two sides of a coin. Then psychologically, the person now, because of the distorted nature or thoughts of the person, he no longer thinks rationally. And that's why you see the increased crime rate. Normally, somebody that is okay, and the thought is, I will not want to go into some of these behaviors that they indulge in. But because their thoughts are distorted, they really cannot think for themselves at that material time. So we see them going into that. And then most of these people that also have commit suicide, it's also didn't just start. That's why we talked about those symptoms. When you look at some of these symptoms and you discover that somebody close to you is exhibiting this, or even you yourself, you no longer can sleep well. You just need to talk to someone. And this stigma is affecting us in such a way that when we start noticing these things, because of the stigma attached to it, we'll say, no, I don't want to, because I don't want to be laughed at. No, we should always seek help. Difficulty in concentrating, either at work or in school. You discover that the person no longer can concentrate. The mind is distorted. A lot of things flashing through the mind. And other impacts that time will not permit me to mention. Then the social impact here. Social withdrawal, social isolation, reduced access to education, employment, labor force reduction. Somebody that has mental illness, you feel that the person cannot assume certain responsibilities. So what are you invariably saying? That person now is what? Redundant, no longer can function. And you need what? Manpower. You need workforce together to work, to be able to provide, to be able to add to the economic situation or the pulse of the society. But if this person you are talking about now is not giving responsibilities, how can this labor force be improved on? That is the social impact of it. And then reduced access to education. Once we notice that our children, most often, or you as a person now, you withdraw from school because you feel that you are unfit. You feel that you're not like every other person, whereas you are. And this thing can happen to what? Anybody, irrespective of your socioeconomic status, just like we said earlier. Then, does it have effects on the family? Yes. It's not just a one-man thing. It has what? Social isolation, just like for the individual. The family can no longer come up in the community because of this stigma. And most often when you want to marry, they'll say, please check that family. Is there any trace of mental illness? That is stigma. You understand? So no family wants that. So they just prefer to hide it and just die in silence. But this thing is, the earlier you notice these things, the better and the quicker and faster the recovery process is. There's also delayed treatment. It goes on when you isolate yourself, when you don't want people to know, you then don't go for what? Treatment, because of the stigma. Then the impact on caregivers. Mental illness is very, very demanding and challenging. In the sense that since the person can no longer think rationally for him or herself, the caregiver has to do all of that. Both the mental work, the physical, because you need to take care of them. Most times they are disruptive and all of that. So you need to be there. And then you have your own personal business to do. But because you need to care for this person, your business could be closed because you don't have somebody there. So it has effect too on the caregivers, that is the family. Your pulse, your finances, your strength, your physical energy, and also your mind. So that is the impact it has on the family. And of course, also on the society. There's the underutilization of mental health services. Because of the fear of being stigmatized, even though our mental health facilities in Nigeria or in the country is minimal and small compared to the nature of mental illnesses or the cases that we have, these services are also underutilized because of this stigma that is attached. Nobody wants to openly come up to say, I am sick. But of a truth, we all here at one point or the other have exhibited some of these symptoms. Yes. So, but it's just that ours is not, when you say somebody has mental illness, the first picture that comes to mind is, the person is roaming the streets. That is not it. The economic situation of this country is enough to make somebody develop depression, which is mental illness. You lose your sleep, which is also a symptom. But why we are not seeing ourselves in that is because it has not affected our social interaction with people. So we need to also watch it so that it doesn't now start affecting to become a social problem. Then the economic cost.
Miss Janet.
Yes.
Miss Janet, I would kindly ask you to conclude in view of the 10 minutes that we have allocated you.
Right.
If you can do so in the next 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. Thank you. So on the society, we have the economic cost. We have the negative impact on public health. Then other barriers to this mental health. Yes, individual level factors. The media influences. The way media portrays it is something else. And then our cultural and social beliefs, like I started, saying all of this, it's also a barrier. And then we have the institutional and structural, like I've explained also. Are there strategies in addressing this thing? Yes. By the time we go into public education and awareness campaign, it will make people to understand what mental illness is all about. It's not about walking the streets naked. It's about your state, the state of your mental health. That is very important. So when people know about this thing, they tend to understand it, and then we'll stop to reduce this stigma from there. We enhance access to medical health services, empowering individuals with lived experiences. Those are people that have come out of mental illnesses and have recovered and have stayed and lived normally. And they also have building supportive communities. In these communities, let's work together with those that have had these experiences. Bring stakeholders together. Bring government agencies together. Are there benefits? Yes. When we have enhanced awareness and understanding of this mental illness, it will help reduce this judgment. People no longer feel afraid. They can come up to say, I have mental illness and I need help. There will also be lower suicide rates. People no longer will want to commit suicide because they have one issue or the other. We have safer communities. There will be low reduced crimes, violence, abuse, and all that. And then the economic benefits will be there because we'll have more workforce and more productivity in the society. Do we have recommendations? Yes.
Thank you.
Conclusion, 1 minute.
Much, Ms. Janet.
Conclusion, please, Ma. What is our role as social workers? That is why we're here, Ma. Sorry. We need to be more committed and involved in attending to social issues because not all mental illnesses are medical. We need to prove to that point to know that, okay, this is a social issue, and then we'll address it. Then we need to talk to the stakeholders, those that are involved, institutions that make policies. Social workers need to be there to really talk about the policies that affect the mentally ill, the stigma that they are being faced. And then we should have collaboration with other health workers to come together for this thing to be effective. So for mental health, addressing stigma and overcoming its social barriers is still an ongoing process that requires incessant and unrelenting efforts. Therefore, with the use of a comprehensive and multidimensional approach and targeted interventions, we can work towards a society that is inclusive, that is supportive, unbiased, and free of mental health stigma. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Janet, for trying to address the critical issues in such a short time. Colleagues in the room, I'll allow you to take note of your questions. Then at the end of our session, we will have time to seek for clarifications and ask our presenters. Then there's an issue that I would want to address. For now, I'll be making use of the official shared program, which I have shared for the to allow the presenters that have been noted to present, and those that have come through who have got their own presentations with the aid of the technical team there. Maybe when we have got time, we'll get back to that. So thank you so much, Miss Igbaba Janet, for taking us through stigma in mental illness, understanding and addressing and overcoming social barriers. As our next presenters are preparing to come up stage, who are Gata Femi Olo and Chinwe Nwana from the University of Lagos, we are going to focus on virtual learning and social work education experiences of visually impaired students at the University of Lagos during the COVID-19 partial lockdown. I would want you to take note that you have got 10 minutes to present, and it would be good for presenters to be mindful of the critical elements of the focus of the conference, which is on sharing best practices, possible solutions, as well as a common position. So please take note that when you are making use of your 10 minutes, you direct it to the most critical issues on possible solutions and a common position for the IFSW's regions participation. So it would be good that you direct your points towards that so that your time will not run out without you giving us the possible solutions and recommendations. With that, I will invite to the stage Gata Femi Olo and Chinwe Aranwanwa from the University of Lagos. I'll also ask my rapporteur to take note of the time. Right now it's 24 past 12. So by 26 minutes to 1, colleagues will be expecting you to conclude. Over to you, colleagues.
Thank you very much. Just to bring to your the name is Gafar. It's actually F, not T. So it's not Gata, it's Gafar. Thank you very much.
My apologies. My apologies.
It's fine. It's fine. So looking back 2 years ago, we had 3 years ago, we had the issue of COVID-19 and the restrictions and lockdowns, and as well as the social distancing policy. All these affected our daily living. We couldn't go out, we couldn't mix, religious lives were halted, religious meetings, social get together were halted, and people could not do as much as they used to do. It affected their finances, it affected their social lives, it affected their networks. But there is a critical demography that was also significantly affected because it changed the ways in which they relate, especially given that their education, their institutional life became an integral part of their daily living. It affected them significantly. Okay, thank you very much. So the first thing we looked at is trace the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic and look at how it led to a shift in how education was being delivered. In Nigeria, the first incidence was in February 2020, and within a month, it has spread to several parts of the country, starting from Lagos State, and hence the government instituted certain policy to curtail the spread of the virus. And one of the policy was requesting institutions, whether financial, whether educational or social, to shut down their doors. And as such, the University of Lagos complied with that policy and shut down. Students were sent back home, and one critical demography that was affected, as I said earlier, is the vision impaired students. One of the critical aspects of social work is the incorporation of field practicum. And we do that here in the University of Lagos. Students are assigned to certain agencies to learn the practical aspects of what they've learned in class. That is, interact with potential clients as well as learn how issues and social work cases are being resolved. As at the time of the lockdown, some of these students were already placed in certain agencies. And one of the critical things they enjoy is that, one, they allocate them to agency that are as close to the university premises as possible. And they are given accommodation on campus. So immediately they shut down the door, it affected their placement. We'll get to that shortly. Next slide, please. Okay. Virtual learning essentially means the shift from traditional classroom in-person teaching practices to a move to online facilitated teaching and learning processes. Recent literature have essentially looked at how the pandemic affected this transition to virtual learning. Because one, the transition itself was forced. Although in the University of Lagos, for instance, virtual learning is partly incorporated into the teaching procedures just for certain courses, i.e., there's a general studies courses. There are general studies courses that are taught online. But regardless, the examinations for those courses were in person. They were computer-based, but they were in person. Students are expected to come to the campus and attempt those questions using computer-facilitated tests. But with the incorporation of virtual learning, both teaching and assessment were moved fully online. And this has some repercussion, which we will look at subsequently. For literature review, we basically focused on certain things that could give us the best results in terms of how we will look at our studies and how we can discuss the findings of our studies. Our study, we looked at COVID-19, virtual learning, and education, trying to look at the nexus among those concepts. We also looked at virtual learning, social work education as well, trying to narrow it down to not just the instances of virtual learning, but how virtual learning affected social work education. We also looked at the effects of COVID-19 on education with emphasis on social work education. And critically, we looked at disability and the experience of those with visual impairments when it comes to virtual learning. For the study, we have adopted what is called an exploratory descriptive study. So we are trying to explore the experience and understanding of the participants, those are visually impaired students of the University of Lagos studying social work. So we focused on that. It's basically an exploratory study set out to understand their experiences, their opinion, and their feelings about the shift to virtual learning. The ages of the students ranged from 25 to 36, and one of the participants was female, and the remaining were male. That's 1 female and 4 males. What we understand is that none of them were congenitally blind, meaning that it was at a point in their life that they started developing visual issues. And we realized that 2 of them were critically impaired, but not totally blind, while 2 of them were completely blind. Therefore, they required some assistance in order to be able to navigate and manage their learning process. Yes. So, from our findings, we were able to establish some thematic concerns in terms of their experience with the virtual learning. That is the learning management system that was adopted by the University of Lagos. The first one that was identified was navigating the learning management system itself, logging in and accessing certain resources and the interface of the learning management system. Also, there was another critical team that was established, that is assessing the course content. It is both accessing and assessing the course content. Sorry. One of the issue that was there was that, we'll still get to that, was that some of the contents that were provided were not readable by their system. Text-to-speech software on their system were unable to read some of those content. Hence, they couldn't access and as well assess what was in those contents. The format of the course materials that were available to them was also a critical issue that they identified. Another thing was accessing assessments and allotted time for those assessments. Examination was another thing that was raised by the participants. Another critical aspect was internet access. And finally, engagement with the system itself. Navigating the LMS. That's, hello? Go ahead.
Yes, please take of time allocated just to bring you to time. You are left with 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'll go through that quickly. They mentioned that it was not easy for them to navigate the system because Essentially, the system was more designed for those that were sighted rather than visually impaired. There were certain contents that were available on the learning management system that was not adapted to some of the challenges that they have. And that was similar for them when it comes to accessing course content. One, for instance, they said if the content were PDF, it makes it easier for them to access because their software that convert text to speech would easily identify the text. But in such cases where there are diagrams or scanned copies of documents, they were unable to access that, and they heavily relied on colleagues to access it on their behalf. Similarly, colleagues were able to download those materials and send them to them in different formats in order for them to access those contents. But one critical thing that was identified when it comes to this is that they felt the learning management system, that's virtual learning, offered them significantly better content. But the challenge was accessing the content. Because unlike speech, where they had to rely on the notes of classmates, they can get those content directly, even when they are not in readable format. They can get people to convert it to readable format for them. And as such, they have full details of those contents. In terms of assessment, one of the significant challenge they had is accessing it itself. Some of the assessment, tests, and assignments that were set for them were set in formats at times that their software cannot read. And as such, it cannot read it out for them. As such, it affected significantly their performance in those assessments. And the time allotted to them, they considered it very minimal, small, and even in terms of compared to traditional classroom settings, the time allotted to them was relatively smaller compared to the regular traditional classes. In terms of examinations, the same challenges they mentioned with assessment also reared its head when it came to taking examinations. Internet access was critical to every aspect of their challenges, whether it's navigating the LMS or accessing the content or taking assessments and taking examination. With internet access at times, they were logged out of sessions, and as such, it affected their performance significantly. Engagement. They mentioned, which was very critical, they said one of the dynamics of learning is the ability to relate with those that are also co-learning with them. And as such, virtual learning removed this aspect of their learning phase. So in most cases, they were distracted, as well as they find out that they were not learning as much as they would have if it was traditional classroom setting. And furthermore, it also affected their engagement with a critical aspect of social work, which is the fieldwork practicum. There were 2 students that were actively participating in their practicum at that time, and they were unable to attend their practicum, which severely limited what they could do. One of the challenges was they had to leave the facility, the accommodation that was provided by the university, and as such, the distance between where they were and where their agency was very far. Also, the agency also had social distancing and regulations that also curtailed the number of people that could be present at the agency at a particular time. We also looked at the implication. I'm rounding up. Sorry. Thank you very much.
If you can move to the conclusions
Yes.
and recommendations,
Yes. Okay.
so that we can also allow other presenters to present.
Thank you.
Can you kindly move
the diagram that will be showed on the screen showed how the shift affected their performances. You can see the 2 first semesters were the semesters that during the COVID-19 restriction and they moved to virtual learning. And you can see significant improvement in performance in the following 2 semesters that were done in persons. Okay. In conclusion, it was noted that there were certain positives in virtual learning that should be encouraged, i.e., visually impaired students were able to access materials that they were easily accessing materials that made learning easier for them, even though some of the processes in which they were accessing it were curtailed by the system, but they were able to access those materials. They also relate to us that in most cases, they preferred virtual learning, but one of the challenges they had was the distance from colleagues that encouraged them to study and be better. So we recommended a blended approach, as well as recommending using tools that are available, such as chats and forum, that will encourage social interaction among students and not just relaying content from the facilitator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gafa, and your colleague for bringing to sight one of the key challenges that persons with disabilities in this context students were facing, especially in view of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, article number 12, which anchors the inclusion of persons with disabilities in education. The issues that you were highlighting show issues to do with human rights in terms of marginalized groups versus their right to education during emergencies. Thank you so much. It will also be interesting to hear from the plenary and everyone else what social work can do in the discourse of human rights and championing the inclusion of students with disabilities in the learning journey. Thank you so much, Gafa. I will invite our next presenter to come through and present so that we proceed. At this point, our next presenter, who's presenter number 3, is Professor Elisette Diogo. My apologies if I mispronounced your name. My sincere apologies. Yeah, they'll be presenting on the topic between expectations and exploitations, guaranteeing human rights to immigrants in Portugal and Europe. As again, please take note, the time allocated is 10 minutes. Over to you, Prof, if they are already in the room.
I will represent her because she cannot be here today. So I will present.
Okay, so I will ask for technical assistance to be able to take our next presenter. Louisa Mira will be presenting on behalf of Professor Elsa, and she's an online presenter. Louisa, kindly take note of the 10 minutes.
Okay.
Over to you, Louisa.
Can I share my present here? Right, let me see. Yeah. Can you see?
Before you proceed, we'll just wait for confirmation. Say is confirming that they can see your presentation. Maybe a confirmation from our physical participants. Are you able to see the PowerPoint that has been shared by Louisa?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for the confirmation. Louisa, you can go ahead. Colleagues are able to see your PowerPoint.
Okay, nice. Good morning. My name is Luisa. I'm a social worker, of course, and I'm in research. Let me in the, sorry, just a second. Yeah, nice. I'm researcher of the project DAY3. Today I will present to you our study called Between Expectation and Exploitation, Guaranteeing Human Rights to Immigrants in Portugal, Europe. So, the project. Firstly, I will present to you a ida inclusiva de desenvolvimento de territórios de baixa densidade. That means going belong the social inclusion of third country national immigrants, TCN, and development of low density territories. This project is promoted by Polytechnic University of Porto Alegre, co-founded by the Brazilian Immigration and Integration Fund. The project aims is analyze the relationship between practice of social work and the development of low density territories, the populated areas, contributing for policy in the field of asylum, protection, and migration. I must add that the Center for Iberian Studies distinguished the IRALEN project, the social inclusion of NPT, and development of low-density territories with research, innovation, and territory 2023 prize. Okay. So, Portugal is receiving international immigrants in a growing tendency. The same is happening in the populated regions. And I think it's not only to this area, of course, in all of the world, we can see a lot of immigrants and also immigrants from Africa. When immigration is done, it's actually for the purpose of study, family, work, or other reasons. How some of newly arrived immigrants may not imagine the possible problems in accessing public health service, housing, education, difficult relation to discrimination, and managing expectations. So social work is college open to support this case. Social works are committed with its principles and values, so must undertake study on the issues of social inclusion and human rights of immigrants. So our research questions what abuse and discrimination face immigrants in the territory? How social workers' contribution to provide human rights for international immigrants? So, the empirical research design adopted a qualitative approach, conduction semi-structured interview, simply was driven by the practitioners of those after transcription, by the 8 practitioner of those 5 women and 3 men. After transcription, the empirical data was analyzed by the context analysis. So the findings are label exploitation, instability and insecurity, discrimination through access to decent routes and lack of it, social and labor rights suspended during the long settlement process to become legal, prevent access at school and healthcare service because misinformation and lack of language for a professional, and social support and benefits denied. I don't know how can I say it, sorry for my English, from public service to illegal immigrants. Okay. Good. So, in the view of this dimension, we highlight a couple of them to develop in this presentation. Some quotes support the results. So, labor instability and insecurity. So, how usually some immigrants go to Portugal and don't have any documents and spend a long time to be regular there. So they usually can leave some difficulties and also find seasonal works, irregular jobs, or jobs without health issues, as can see following segments. The problem is that they are people in a precarious situation who are working, who have work accidents, and they don't even have the right to anything because they did not even have insurance and nothing is expected. So, about misinformation in service as school and healthcare service stand-off professionals of service are not aware of law on migration and regular immigrants believe that they do not have rights as mentioned by one of the participants because due to lack of knowledge, due to lack of information, most immigrants think that being in a irregular situation or being in a process for it, they are not entitled to absolutely anything. This then ends up depriving them of access to basic service such as health, social support, access to training, and education. So we highlight another point to be developed in this presentation around discrimination to access decent housing and lack of it. We emphasize perpetrators are afraid to rent to international immigrants and on offer precarious, humid, and overcrowded house as cited by one of the interviewees. I accompanied some immigrants were to visit a house, and when you look at them, you twisted your face a bit. The owner of the house, started to say, "Oh yeah, but the house needs some work." So seeing the tenant, the house was available, and now it needs work, so it's kind of suspect. Okay. The results are in concordance with the literature. For example, around access to service, there is an author who discussed the lack of the preparation of public service professional in dealing with immigrants. Likewise, from the perspective of discrimination in obtaining house, there are authors who emphasize this difficulty, including referring to overcrowding and precarious house because they cannot pay for high houses rent.
Sorry, Louisa, just to make you aware, you're left with 2 minutes. Please take notes.
Okay. So to conclude, social works have skills to address the basic needs of immigrants, providing information and awareness to service and host society, reducing prejudice and racism, and thus contributing to social justice and guarantee of human rights. Social work should contribute to design of policy on migration, local development, and sustainability in the light of the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. So here we have some reference, and thank you. Please follow us on social media.
Thank you so much, Louisa, for trying to be on time. Just checking if you were on time. Yes, I think for the record, you managed to present within your 10 minutes. And thank you so much, together with Prof. Diogo, for being able to share your findings, especially on a contemporary issue of migrants, which is very in our continent due to drivers such as war, economic challenges, and others seeking asylum, and the importance of how then we include them through participation and protection and promotion of their rights. And you also pointed out in your presentation some of the critical rights, such as access to health, access to shelter, and most of all, the clarion call of what social work as a profession should do in order to protect the protection of these migrants. I hope colleagues in the fiscal room are also able to take note down of their reflections and questions as we prepare for our last presenter, who was supposed to be the first presenter on the program, just to check if they've arrived yet, because when we started in this session, they were not yet in. Presenter number 4 is presenting to us on the issue to do with, just to check so that I do not make any mistakes, on the role of social workers in the promotion and protection of human rights, justice administration in view, by Tony Ojuku, who's the Executive Secretary for the Human Rights Commission in Nigeria. My apologies, I have not pronounced well the name, but I would be willing to learn through correction. Just to confirm with my colleagues who are there physically, he is the Executive Secretary from the Human Rights Commission of Nigeria arrived, Tony Ojuku, to be able to take us through their presentation.
Ojuku is not in the room. Tony Ojuku is not here. Tony Ojuku is not here.
It's unfortunate that Ojuku is not here. I think I'll wait for guidance from the technical team, because I requests that I received via the online platform message from Dr. Mina Ogbanga, who wanted to present, but I think the technical team can assist me and sort out this issue to the 2 presentations if they are in line with the thematic area of human rights. Colleagues, having gone through the 3 presentations that we have, one of the key themes of this conference is to promote participation and exchange of ideas. So I'll be opening up the floor. It's good that we still have got time, I think the next 20 minutes, to be able to respond, ask questions to our presenters. So this is how we progress in terms of how we do our discussions. We will have 3 questions like from the audience. They will ask. Then after the 3 questions have been asked, we'll allow responses from the presenters. Then we have another round of questions. Then we allow the presenters to respond, another round, as then we get to draw and conclude. As you'd know that the social work profession shares a close relationship with human rights, because it adheres to values such as respect, dignity, and self-determination. These values are strongly embedded in the code of ethics for all practitioners. And therefore, you'd find that social work practice is not alienable to issues of human rights. And we should shape our discussions to be able to show and answer to the critical question: what do we think social workers or the social work profession should do in order to address human rights issues that we are facing? At present, we had 3 presentations. Miss Janet Igbaba talked about quality treatment and care in mental health service provision, as well as the recognition of the rights of persons who have got mental health illnesses, which stems from one of our values, which is dignity and worth of the person. Then Gafa, Femi Olowu, and Chine Aranwanwa, they talked about the inclusion of visually impaired students versus the right of education. Then last but not least, we had Louisa and Prof. Diego talking about rights of immigrants. At this point, I will open up the floor with assistance maybe from the rapporteur or someone from the technical team to take our first 3 questions or responses or reflections from the rest of the group who are in the room. Then after the first 3 responses, we have our presenters speaking to us.
Hello, my first reaction is just to also join you, Ma'am, to thank the presenters for the well-researched presentations that they've given us. First of all, I want to speak to my colleague who spoke about discrimination for people with mental health. I was thinking I needed to be helped to understand what discrimination is, because from my world, if you are going to say, because of the nature of the challenges that our friends with mental health have, let's find a place within the hospital facility where they can be given specialized attention. I don't see that to be discrimination. You cannot get someone with a challenge of mental health and bring them into the mainstream mental facility and expect that they are going to fit in well. Because of their nature of problem, they may not be able to fit in well in the hospital setup. And what we do is, instead of taking them outside the hospital facility, we create a facility where they can be able to be given a specialized attention. I remember my colleague also spoke about this discrimination where you say, okay, before you marry in that family, do they have this challenge of mental health? I don't find that to be discrimination. I think it's being methodical and careful, that you just don't pop into any family and be part of the problem that they may have, because much as we appreciate the fact that mental health is a serious concern for the whole community and maybe society, I don't see anything wrong with me saying, okay, the person that I want to get married to, could they be infected with HIV? So that even when I'm deciding to be with them, I know some of the challenges that would arise if I went through to get married with them. So let me be helped in terms of discrimination. Is it really discrimination if we are going to say, okay, I cannot be with her because she has this challenge now, or maybe we cannot put them in the same room with these guys because they have this problem. Let's put them somewhere and help them in a special way so that they can also recover and be joined with society. Is that discrimination? But then quickly also, my colleague who spoke about the challenges of visually impaired persons in Unilag, my question to him would be, apart from looking at those 4 people within Unilag that were visually impaired and had those experiences due to COVID-19, my question is, did we try to triangulate these findings with maybe a nearby university just to see that these challenges were general and they needed the social workers' interventions at that level, and they were not just unique to those 4 students? Because I feel the sample of 4 people was a bit too limited to draw conclusions and generalization. Did we attempt to just also triangulate these findings with a few other universities, just bounce them so that we are able to have a more reliable conclusion on the subject matter? Chair, I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the contribution on the question. I think the first question is directed to Ms. Bennett. Can you clarify on issues to do with discrimination? Then question number 2, it's directed to GAFA. on the issue of research method rigor on issues to do with sampling and generalization. Thank you so much. Can I have the next contribution on the questions and reflections?
All right.
So that
Thank you. I just a general observation. Like we keep talking about social work, Ubuntu. I've been observing our programs since we started, and I've not seen us taking care of the hearing impaired people. All our programs that have been aired, there is nothing, signifying that we took them into consideration. All these things we are doing, it's only for us. The hearing impaired, their rights. What about that? I know we are concluding today. I just want to advise to just suggest that we take it into consideration moving forward, because it has to start from us. We have to be able to do what we are saying. Thank you.
thank you so much for the contributions. Social workers should walk the talk. She's talking about just reflect on the structure of the conference. The critical question, where are persons with disabilities? Let's walk the talk. Thank you so much. We'll move to the last reflection and response section.
Okay, so my question is directed to Ms. Janet. You talked about mental health with spirituality. So how are we able to convince people with different ethical backgrounds that mental health is not all about being spiritual? How are you able to convince them to take them to the psychiatric hospital and all sorts? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues, for sharing your responses. So I will end over time, maybe starting with Janet. You have got 3 questions. Kindly clarify on issues to do with discrimination. Then number 2 is up 2 questions. Number 2, how do we take up mental health treatment? Over to you, Miss Janet, maybe in 2 minutes, so that we are able to discuss more and allow other colleagues from the floor to comment. Miss Janet?
I'm here.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. The first question, discrimination. Okay. I gave that example. Let me explain further with an example. I gave that illustration with an example in mind. Okay, but the time didn't allow me to marry the both. Now, when I was talking about discrimination, that these persons that have mental illness, they don't usually build their facility where the medical wards usually are. It's because their cases are special. Special, it's not stigma. But when you now put them in a place, the structure, you see that it's dilapidated. Yes. If you visit hospitals, go to most psychiatric hospitals, visit them, visit their toilets, you will cry. Let me give you this story. There was this hospital, a psychiatric, let me not call the name because I'm online. Yes. The patients, they complained about the sanitary condition. The environment was pushy. You could barely see the road, the path to their linking to their ward. So they complained. But hospital with bureaucracy, they will say, okay, they've written to the management, they are doing something about it and all that. So one of the patients, their recovery usually takes time. He was there when he was not coherent enough to understand the environment that he was. He never saw that as a problem. But when he was recovering, he noticed that, no, this place is bushy. No, this toilet is not clean and all that. So he made the complaint to the nurses because they're usually with them, and then they channel those things appropriately. And they told him that they were going to do something about it, but nothing was done. One day, they closed from work, they went home. On arrival to work the next day, those that were on night duties couldn't come out. Those that were coming for morning duty couldn't go in. What happened? This guy, because he now understood the environment that he was, he connived, now, okay, he discussed with his colleagues and they closed the gates. They said they want to see the management that have not always given them listening ear. So that is the area I was coming from. Yes, not the fact that they should be together in the same word. Yes, I hope I'm able to answer your question. Okay, then
Janet, just also to raise awareness, it also happens to be an area of my specialty,
okay.
The issue of mental health and human rights. I think it's also good to share awareness with social workers at this platform that currently the World Health Organization is advocating for a program which they call the Quality Health Rights Treatment and Services for persons who have got mental health illnesses, where issues of discrimination are tackled. And I liked the question that was asked, well, how do we balance the issue of quality treatment is drawn from article number 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Then they also have got a toolkit which is available free online for social workers. I will share in the inbox messages the website which you can access. It will help us to become aware to the issues of mental health issues and some of the issues that were being raised. There is advocacy that a person, even if they've got a mental illness, and sometimes they might not have capacity to decide from them, they have got what is called a right to legal consent, and they are talking about advanced plans where someone with a mental health condition can elaborate on how they would want to be handled when mental health attack. And what is important is to make sure that in whatever we are doing, we anchor it on the promotion of human rights, that this is a human being. There is dignity and worth of a person. And even when we're talking about seclusion elements in the hospital, there's also advocacy that is going around that, because that also affects the road to recovery. They are talking about integration, because most medical institutions that focus on mental health support, care, and treatment, they are usually called annexes. They are separate buildings. So they're advocating for integration and inclusion, where within the hospital, just like any other wards, there is that ward, and people are treated with dignity and work during this issue. But it also talks about cultural sensitivity, being able as social workers to break it down to our local people in their own language, how they understand mental illness, and allowing them to be part of the solution. So I think in issues of discrimination, the core around mental health patients is that before we see the condition, let's see the person. Let's treat the person with dignity. And again, I think Jenny gave an example in terms of premarital counseling, when someone is doing historical checking up. If someone is doing historical checkup about mental health illness, history in the family when they are dating, it should be done in a dignified way. And someone should not be discriminated against having disclosed that. And again, their right to disclose or not to disclose, it's also their right and it's guaranteed. So these are some of the contemporary debates that are going on. I'll share in the messages the link that we can be able to take that course. It comes with a certification, free online from World Health Organization.
Thank you, Ma, for that wonderful contribution. Okay, to the next question. When I was giving the historical overview of it, I think that was when I talked about the spirituality that before civilization, that is in ancient civilization, they viewed mental illness as being possessed, someone that was possessed. That was the idea about it. Why? Because there was no enlightenment, there was no research. Nothing was being done about it. So the local community, as at that time, saw it. They didn't really see any reason why somebody could have mental illness. So what they could attribute it to was the fact that it was spiritual, or being a punishment from the gods, or being possessed by a demon. That was how they saw it, until little enlightenment started coming in, and people started having psychiatric, hospitals, shelters, and all that. And then researches started coming up. And then they now say, oh, this is not spiritual. This is what a medical condition that can be treated. And someone can actually move to recovery. And the spirituality in our modern days now, we're also trying to involve our religious leaders. Because most of us, whether a Christian, Muslim, whatever religion that you practice, your religion is more like the third absent person to us. That means that we listen to these persons more. So we are trying to co-opt them into our services, like trying to make them understand that this is not all about spirituality. This is not spiritual, because if it is spiritual, it should be prayed and that person can be cured. So getting our spiritual leaders into having an understanding that this is a medical condition and not a spiritual thing can also go a long way to help that. Hope I'm able to answer your question. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. We'll leave the time to Gaffer to respond on the issue of methodology and rigor in terms of whether his sample is adequate for generalizability to the greater population. Over to you, Gaffer.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that question, because methodology is central to any research. But in research, there are different ontological views about methodology. It could be inductive, it could be deductive. And most times when you target a generalization, you're mostly looking at deductive and trying to say to a certain percentage, to a certain proportion, you understand, and prevalence. But there is also an exploratory angle to research. What you're targeting is the context. And the target of this research was the context, the experience of social work students with visual impairment in the University of Lagos. And once we are targeting that particular population, we have already defined the scope of the study. If they are one, that means I would only study that one person, because that's the scope of the study. I understand the need to generalize, but research allows you to define certain boundaries, certain criteria for your research. And we were particularly focused on the experience of our students in the University of Lagos. I lecture in the Department of Social Work, University of Lagos. We wanted my co-investigator, that's the lead, Professor Wana, she happens to be the head of the department. We wanted to understand the experiences of our students in terms of the shift to virtual learning. So it was more context-based, and that's why it was critical that it was part of the title of the study. We can drive towards generalization by spreading it to other universities or expanding it to understand the views of other disabilities as well as other categories of students. But the target of this study was that category of students, and they were just 4. And therefore, we can't attempt any other participant aside from those targets. Sir? So it was the context, not the generalization. We want to understand the experience. That's why I said the method is exploratory as well as qualitative. Thank you for the question, sir. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gaffer, for a detailed response. And it's good that people are lively.
Hello, my co-investigator, that's the lead. She wants to mention some few things. She's here as well.
Okay, it's okay. We can give time to, I think it's Nano. Is it so?
Chairperson. Yeah, actually, the study was exploratory. Now that we have found out that our students experience this, we can now escalate it to other departments, other faculties. Let's see what visually impaired students experience from the shift from normal examination method to virtual examination. So we are yet to do more study on this, which we will now combine qualitative and quantitative methods of data collection to know the level of experiences they have. The level of challenges they experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Is it Chine Noana? Thank you so much for clarifying that. I think we are also getting to learn, because there is also debates around how are we able to contribute meaningfully in terms of research based on some of the qualitative issues that we do, issues that are embedded in the social, and issues of research always tend to be subjective. But thank you so much, colleagues, for the active engagement. I will open up the floor maybe to have 5 more people, your general responses, because we have at hand in this room to be able to really show what then should the social work profession do in order to mainstream human rights. So feel free to contribute or even ask questions directly to the presenters, or even to give your thoughts around what we should do as a profession in line with this.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. I my own dwell on the topic stigma and mental illness, understanding, addressing, and overcoming social barriers. I must say, I limit my own instance to the Nigerian situation, where we have about 25 to 30% of the population having mental illness. And out of this, it's about 10% that has access to any professional assistance. And you recall that the World Health Organization says 3% of the health budget must go to mental health. And as it is now, Nigeria, as usual, is falling below this particular level expectation of the World Health Organization. So I'm suggesting that social work has a whole lot of work to do in terms of advocacy, trying to let the government of the day know if there be maybe a unit that could be in enforcement, to make sure that government of the day budgets the expected makes expected budget to mental health, because 25 to 30% is a very high figure, and this has continuously is on the increase since, given the economic depression, not just in Nigeria now, in Africa. Because I must say, for Nigeria, I think Madam Gaffa made that allusion. Nigeria is like a pressure cooker for stress in every facet of the national life. And that being the case, the issue of mental health is increasing. So there is need for the government of the day to make a whole lot of budget in terms of establishing more centers for mental health hospitals. There are very few in Nigeria. There should be advocacy for use of ECG, EET, all those high-end equipments that help mental health patients. There is need for social work to have an office in every hospital, be it in government hospitals, so to speak. And also there should be some of these faith organizations where mental health patients usually run to. There should also be, medical, access. The social workers should also attend to, or be, how would I put it, deployed to some of these big faith organizations, because most of them, they do not actually know the head and tail about mental health. Some of them, they take it to be spiritual. So there is need for social workers or social work as a unit to do more in terms of advocacy, to get the government to be aware to their duties, to be responsible to what they ought to do when it comes to mental health. Because I can tell you, as I said, the population is increasing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Quite powerful recommendations. The social workers should take the advocacy role. I liked the recommendation. I hope the rapporteur managed to capture it. That social workers, maybe for a start, in terms of advocacy around mental health issues, should advocate for the bare minimum 3% recommendations from World Health Organization across all the African continents in terms of making sure that the national budget includes this and the deployment of social workers to each and every medical institution that is availing mental health services and issues to do with awareness raising. Thank you so much for the powerful contribution.
Soft copy. Yeah. Hello, Madam
It's okay,
Chairperson.
Yes, you can
Yeah.
go ahead. I've acknowledged you.
Yeah, thank you. May I answer? If I understand you, you asked the question about what is the role of social workers in promoting the rights of women. Is that?
I had said in the promotion of human rights, of which women rights are also part of human rights. You can go ahead.
Okay. The role of social workers will be to continue creating awareness, lobbying, advocacy. Although we have made some gains, but we continue until we get there. We will not stop. Because our culture also is one of the factors that hinders the promotion of women's rights. Well, particularly those of us from patriarchal societies. So we should continue to create awareness of the danger, of the consequences or the implications of neglecting women's rights. We continue to lobby the politicians, the leaders, to make sure that we achieve the 35% of the affirmative action. And then we also continue to do research to know whether we are having results, whether positive or negative results. This is my own suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the powerful contributions. We'll open up maybe right now it's 1:26. We had time up until 1:30, so I'll allow I think about 4 more contributions. If we can also just
I have
keep
a
them
question,
short.
please.
Yes, it's okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm Olani Taiwo from Social Work Unilag. So, I want to talk about the mental health issue. As a social work, we help other people to help them in addressing their problem and finding solution to it. But social workers who are with, because we are humans, we also go through mental challenges. Who do we meet to our solutions, our own problems too?
Okay,
Okay.
colleagues, if I can call the house to order.
All right.
If I can call the house to order, I think the colleague is raising a very critical issue. We are talking about promotion of the rights of other people who have got mental health illnesses. And the question is, where does the social worker who is the helper tend to when they also have mental health problems? I'll allow maybe 2 colleagues to respond to that, since it's bothers to us. We might be in this room and there are a lot of mental health issues. I hear my colleagues saying Nigeria is a pressure cooker for mental health issues. So someone might not even following the whole conference, and they are in that welfare issue, but a very serious question. What do we do? Where does the social worker go to when they have mental health issues?
All right, thank you for that, dear colleague. I am Gbadi Shire Enyade from Oyo State Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Inclusion. I'll just say that, like she has said, as a practitioner, self-care is most important. We take care of ourselves before we take care of others. You cannot give what you don't have. It is good, it is okay to declare you are not okay. These facilities we take our clients through, they are available for us as well. we are not restricted from enjoying these facilities. And it is okay to declare that I am not okay. We can avoid burnout. We can avoid being bogged down with so much work that we don't have time for ourselves. That's just. And then we should look inwards on time before it gets out of hand.
Thank you
Hello?
so much. I can't see now the screen from everyone else. We are at 29 minutes past 1. I will allow the person who wants to speak to speak.
Okay. My name is Iyokoetin Rex Benjamin from Social Work Department, University of Benin. Now, a case is not a file or a machine or a computer. A case is a human being that has problem. And who are those to solve the problem? Social workers. Irrespective of whoever has the problem, whether you are a social worker or not, it's our responsibility to solve the problem because we are trained to solve social problems. Problem that affect significant number of persons, and people think that something should be done about the problem. Again, looking at it, as social workers, we also counsel a counselor. You can counsel a counselor, and the first law of nature, self-preservation is the first law of nature. First, you have to talk about your health, you talk about your well-being and your security and all that before you can begin to think of proffering solutions to other people's problems. In all of this, a social worker can also be counseled. A counselor can be counseled. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, colleagues. It's unfortunate everyone would want to talk, but I'm also checking on the time that we have allocated. It's now 29 minutes to 2, but I think we should do this. I think we can have a round of applause for all of us that were in room 3 for a start.
All right. I have a question. Okay, my name is Olusegun Temilola, social work, University of Lagos here. I'm posing this question to all of us here. Where do we draw the line when we talk about the role of spirituality? The case of what happened recently in UK of a Nigerian nurse who was praying, for her patients, and at the end of the day, I think she was sacked. So where do we draw the line as social workers? That's my question. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I will take time as the moderator in line with the time that we have to try and conclude what we have deliberated about. I've taken note of the question. I will include it in the recommendations. You'd find that today on core as room number 3, we had the role to look at mainstreaming human rights in social work practice, where we started by looking at the it's unfortunate that we couldn't look at the role of social workers in the promotion and protection of human rights, justice and administration view, because Ms. John Ojuku was not available, but Ms. Janet managed to take us through mental illness, understanding, addressing and overcoming social barriers. Then Gafa Femi Olou and Chinwe Aranwanwa managed to take us through virtual learning and social work education experiences of visually impaired students at the University of Lagos during COVID-19 partial lockdown. Then we also went to Portugal, where Louisa, together with Professor Diego, managed to take us between expectations and exploitations, guaranteeing human rights to immigrants in Portugal. And after those presentations, we were able to ask questions and to reflect on our position as social workers in championing human rights. We talked about raising awareness in different rights, whether for women, for persons with disabilities, for men, for the youth, whoever it is, to raise awareness, advocacy, lobbying, and issues to do it consistently. Then I think there's also need for regional movement and solidarity when we are looking at these issues where we are consolidated, but having a very individual approach, appreciating the different of contexts. Colleagues also talked about research. Then also we had contributions on safeguarding of the social worker by first availing requisite care and support to be able to take care of ourselves before we step into the line of duty through self-care and recusals. And there is a critical question as we conclude and close up this section that comes right at the end, which I think should also be extended to other social workers, which is, where do we draw the line in terms of spirituality, especially in the discourse of human rights and our provision of service? Where do we draw the lines? Sometimes spirituality can be positive, sometimes it can be negative. But the critical question that we will leave and reflect on as we conclude this section is, where do we draw the line in terms of the spirituality? That said, as your moderator today, may I take time to thank all the participants in this room for coming through to our breakaway session, for participating lively, and for being professional in building the profession and each other, and also to our presenters, Miss Igbaba Janet, Gafa Femi Olo, and Chinwe Aranwanwa, Professor Elisette Diogo, and Louisa. Thank you so much for making this possible, and everyone, thank you so much. Have a good day as we end this breakaway session.
Thank you.